I woke up at 3 a.m. to a nightmare I never saw coming. My wife, the woman I trusted most, in the arms of another man. What happened next changed everything. One summer, my younger brother, Kyle, reached out to me with some unexpected news. He had been living in South America for the past 3 years, where he had even managed to start his own small business. Up until now, Kyle had always preferred keeping things casual when it came to relationships, never really settling down with anyone. But this time his message was different. He told me he had finally met someone special, a woman he was serious about and ready to commit to. Along with this revelation, he sent me a postcard letting me know that he was planning to visit us for a week or two if possible. Unlike Kyle, I had always leaned towards more traditional commitments, and I suspected that our conversations over the years had influenced his decision in some way. He often listened to my advice, even when he pretended not to, and this time was no different. He promised to stay patient and see where things led with his new relationship. The day of Kyle's arrival finally came. His flight was scheduled to land at 1:35 a.m., so I headed to the airport to pick him up. I arrived a little earlier than expected, giving me some time to people watch as travelers bustled through the terminal. For a brief moment, I had this odd sensation as if something about the world around me had subtly shifted, like an unshakable feeling that something was out of place. But before I could dwell on it too much, I heard a familiar voice calling out to me. There he was, Kyle, grinning and waving as he made his way toward me. I hurried over to meet him, and as soon as we reunited, the years apart seemed to disappear in an instant. Later that day, after we had settled in, Kyle wasted no time catching up with the family. He playfully ruffled Michael's hair and chuckled at how much he had grown. "Sammy, look at you. You're getting too big for me to carry," he laughed, attempting to lift the little one but quickly setting him back down when he realized how much heavier he had gotten. Kyle and his wife had also brought gifts for the kids, which, of course, immediately captured their full attention. Rather than making them sit at the table with the adults, we let them retreat to their room with their new toys, allowing us to enjoy a relaxed evening together. A few drinks later, I started feeling the effects of the long day and decided to lie down. The couch wasn't exactly comfortable, so I made my way to the bedroom to continue resting. As I checked the clock, I noticed it was already past 2:30 a.m. The house had fallen into a deep silence, dimly lit and eerily still, as if everyone had quietly slipped away into their rooms for the night. Navigating through the dark, I stumbled a few times over misplaced furniture but eventually reached my room. As I stepped inside, a strange unease crept over me, though at that moment I couldn't quite put my finger on why. As I entered the bedroom, my heart nearly stopped. Lying in bed wasn't my wife, but Marie. She was resting comfortably, wearing nothing but a thin shirt, seemingly unbothered by the situation. But the moment our eyes met, I could tell she wasn't surprised in the slightest. Unlike me, she remained completely calm. "Brian, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft, almost drowsy. "What's wrong? Marie, what are you doing here? Where's my wife? And why aren't you with my brother?" My head was spinning as I frantically glanced around the room, half expecting Kyle and my wife to be standing there, as if some strange misunderstanding would suddenly make sense. But they were nowhere to be seen. Marie let out a sigh, stretching slightly before sitting up. "Relax. They're probably sleeping somewhere too. We all had quite a bit to drink. Just lie down and get some rest." Her nonchalant tone only unsettled me further. Nothing about this felt normal. "Marie," I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady, "how did this even happen? Why are you in my room?" She rubbed her eyes before answering, her voice thick with sleep. "Brian, you're overthinking this. We must have just had too much to drink and got our rooms mixed up. Did you check on the kids? Are they asleep?" At that moment, the kids were the least of my concerns. I knew they were responsible enough to stay out of trouble, but what really troubled me was the chaotic situation unfolding among the four of us. And more importantly, where was Kyle? How had things gotten so out of hand? I racked my brain trying to piece together the events of the previous night. "Wait, how did my wife end up in your room?" "You two were together the whole time," I said, hoping she could make sense of it. Marie let out a small chuckle, shaking her head. "Oh man, you really don't remember, do you? You had quite a lot to drink last night. Ruth and I had a little argument and she went to bed early. She must have gone into the wrong room by mistake. Meanwhile, I stayed in the kitchen drinking and smoking. That's why I just came out now." I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. "You really think that's all there is to it?" She smirked. "Yes, Brian. That's all there is to it. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I wasn't sure if I believed her. Something still didn't feel right, but at least I had some answers. "All right. I guess I just needed to clear my head." She gave me a knowing look. You should probably get some more sleep. I nodded, though my mind was still restless. Deciding I needed a different perspective, I went to find Michael. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was him. I found him in his room and spoke to him like an equal, hoping for clarity. Listen, son. I took a deep breath before speaking. Michael, I need to talk to you about last night. He glanced toward the hallway. Is Sammy awake? Yeah, he's in the bathroom, I replied. But listen, did you notice anything strange last night? Anything at all? Michael frowned, clearly trying to recall the events of the evening. You mean with the adults? Not really. What happened? I hesitated for a moment, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes sometimes things happen that don't make sense at first. I just wanted to know if you saw or heard anything unusual. Before he could answer, something clicked in my mind: Sammy's teddy bear. I had seen it in the wrong room earlier, and a gut feeling told me it might hold some answers. Without wasting a second, I seized the opportunity and retrieved it. The bear had a small recording device inside, a feature we had installed long ago for safety, never really thinking it would serve any real purpose. I couldn't watch the footage immediately. Kyle had been shadowing me all morning, acting as if nothing was wrong, making it impossible for me to find a quiet moment. But later, when I finally managed to slip away to my office, I shut the door, took a deep breath, and pressed play. I had no idea what I was about to witness. At most, I expected to see Ruth stumbling into the wrong room in a drunken haze before passing out. But what I saw instead shattered any illusion I had about my marriage, and about my own brother. The first few seconds of the recording showed Kyle and Ruth, together. In bed. My hands clenched into fists, my heart pounding in my chest. A burning rage surged through me, raw and overwhelming. How could they? How could the two people I trusted most betray me like this? My whole body tensed as the realization sunk in, a mix of heartbreak and fury twisting inside me. And yet, there he was, the man who had stabbed me in the back, walking around my house as if nothing had happened, looking me in the eyes without a shred of shame. I didn't wait another second. Fueled by pure anger, I stormed out of the office, nearly colliding with Michael, who was heading downstairs for breakfast. He took one look at my face and immediately sensed something was wrong. Dad? What happened? For a moment I almost told him everything. I was seconds away from spilling out the gut-wrenching truth, from letting my fury take over. But I caught myself just in time. Michael was still young, and no matter how mature he was, this wasn't something he should have to bear. Instead, I forced myself to swallow the words and brushed past him, heading toward the kitchen where Kyle and Ruth were casually sitting, as if nothing had happened. Today was supposed to be a simple day, one where we stayed home, watched the game, shared a few beers, and talked about old times. But all of that had changed. My plans were different now. I didn't care what they thought or how they reacted. I was done pretending. I just wanted to get Kyle away from the house, away from the kids, so we could have a man-to-man conversation. He kept asking where we were going, but I gave him nothing, just a vague, "You'll see, it's a surprise." Maybe he already suspected that I knew everything. Maybe he had already prepared some excuse, some lie to smooth things over. But I didn't want his lies. The second we were out of sight, my rage boiled over. Without hesitation, I lunged at him, my fists swinging before I even registered what I was doing. I wanted to make him feel every ounce of pain he had inflicted on me. But Kyle wasn't weak, he fought back just as fiercely. We didn't speak. There was no need. Every punch thrown, every desperate grapple, every shove, it all spoke for us. Our glances carried more words than we ever could have said. For several long minutes, we fought like animals, neither of us willing to back down. To me it felt like an hour had passed. Maybe it was because I had never imagined myself in this position, brawling with my own brother like a bitter enemy. Or maybe it was because the truth hurt more than the punches, because the man my wife had betrayed me with was my own flesh and blood. As the fight wore on, exhaustion started to settle in, but the anger didn't fade. It wasn't enough. No fight could undo what had happened. No amount of bruises could erase the betrayal. Eventually I stepped back, breathing hard, staring at the man I had once trusted more than anyone. But instead of continuing, I turned away. There was nothing left to say, at least not to him. I needed answers. I went back to the house and found Ruth sitting in the living room, lazily flipping through a magazine as if nothing had happened. That eerie calmness, that complete lack of guilt or remorse, it was almost worse than the betrayal itself. I sat across from her, my voice low and firm. "Ruth, tell me the truth. How well do you really know my brother? And don't give me some excuse about innocent feelings, I want the real answer." She barely looked up from the pages as if I was just an annoying distraction. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice flat. I clenched my fist. "Don't play dumb, Ruth. I know everything." She sighed, finally setting the magazine down, and turned her gaze toward me. "Fine," she said. "You want the truth?" And then, just like that, she dropped a bombshell I never saw coming. Kyle had been in prison. He had been caught within the first few months of whatever scheme he had been running and ended up behind bars for 2.5 years. I blinked, struggling to process what I had just heard. "That's impossible," I muttered. "He would have told me." Ruth let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Oh, just like he told you about his affair with me?" She tilted her head, watching my reaction. "We met before he got out. He used that time to learn a few new tricks, and when he was released he decided to try his luck again. And well, things worked out pretty well for him, didn't they?" I could barely breathe. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was something much, much bigger. And suddenly I realized I had no idea who my brother really was. I stayed home waiting. Ruth had already left, disappearing before my wife arrived, leaving me alone with my thoughts filled with rage, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of despair. I felt like I was drowning in it, struggling to contain myself, to keep my anger from exploding the moment Mary walked through the door. But the second she did, acting as if nothing had happened, asking about the kids like it was just another normal day, I lost control. Before I could stop myself, my hand struck her face. The sound of the slap echoed through the room as Mary stumbled backward, falling to the floor. "Brian, what are you doing?" she gasped, looking up at me, shocked and terrified. But then something in her expression shifted. She understood. She knew. I took a step back, my own breath coming in ragged gasps. "How could you?" My voice trembled, a mix of fury and devastation. "How could you do this to me? To our family?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if they were from pain, regret, or just the fear of being caught. Before she could respond, I heard footsteps behind me. Kyle. He walked in cautiously, his face bruised from our earlier fight. He must have tried to clean himself up, but a bit of dried blood still lingered on his lip. What he didn't know, though, was that Ruth had already told me everything. And now he was here, probably ready to spin some story, play the part of the guilty, apologetic brother. "Listen, bro," he started, forcing a sigh as if he truly felt remorse. "Things didn't work out the way I thought they would. I know I messed up. I was wrong. But I just couldn't resist your wife." His words sent another wave of rage through me. "Don't you dare talk about her," I growled, rising to my feet and stepping toward him. "You've lied so much, Kyle, you're going to start confusing yourself." My hands clenched into fists. "So let's try something new. Tell me the truth. Why did you really come back here? And don't you dare lie. I already know about Ruth." Kyle's smirk flickered across his face before he quickly masked it with a forced look of regret. "Oh," he murmured. "So she spilled the beans, huh?" I turned to Mary, who had been sitting frozen on the couch, watching everything unfold with wide, horrified eyes. I already knew she had been deceiving me for a long time, but there was one question I needed answered more than anything else. Michael and Sammy. I loved them more than life itself, and if they weren't mine, if she had been lying about that too, I didn't even know what I would do. "Tell me the truth, Mary," I demanded, my voice low, steady. "Are they mine?" Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head rapidly. "Yes, Brian," she sobbed. "I swear to you they're yours. I would never lie about that. Kyle and I, it was only for a few months before he left the country. It meant nothing. Nothing." I stared at her, my heart pounding, my mind still struggling to process everything. It was almost laughable. After everything, after all the lies, she still had the nerve to say it meant nothing. But if there was one thing I was sure of, it was this: I didn't care what she or Kyle had done. I didn't care about their twisted betrayal. Michael and Sammy were mine. And they were the only thing in this world I wasn't going to lose. "I already lost my family years ago when you betrayed me, Mary." She lowered her gaze, guilt washing over her face. For a long moment, she sat there in silence, staring at the floor as if searching for the right words. Then suddenly she stood up and dropped to her knees before me, gripping my hands, her voice trembling. "Brian, please, please forgive me," she begged. "I swear Kyle forced me into it. He threatened me, said he'd expose my secret if I didn't go along with him." I stiffened. Another secret? At this point, I had already uncovered enough betrayal for a lifetime. I couldn't imagine what else she could possibly say that would shock me any further. My voice came out flat, devoid of emotion. "What secret, Mary?" She hesitated, her lips trembling before finally speaking. And what she told me was something I never could have predicted. Years ago, Kyle had gotten himself into serious trouble, not just with his reckless behavior but with a deal gone horribly wrong. He had been involved in selling what he claimed were rare collector's coins, promising a fortune to the buyers. But those coins? They were worthless fakes. Because of that, he found himself tangled in a mess that he couldn't escape from. But I didn't care about that. I told him the real trouble wasn't the fake coins. The real mistake was when he abandoned his own family. His own brother. All because of greed. All because of envy. Of course, I had known all along that the coins he was dealing with weren't real. I had made copies of them years ago, fearing that one day someone might try to rob our home. The real coins? I had hidden them in the safest place I could think of, buried beneath our grandfather's tombstone. I had intended for them to remain there, untouched, until my children were old enough to inherit them. And Kyle? He had no idea. As I processed Mary's confession, the weight of everything that had happened crushed down on me. The betrayal, the lies, the years of deception. It was all too much. But there was one thing I knew for certain. Kyle had lost everything and now so had Mary. Because no amount of pleading could ever undo what they had done. I had voiced my concerns about Josephine to my mom more than once, but each time she simply shrugged them off. "Oh, don't be silly," she'd say. "Josephine is harmless. She has a heart of gold." But I wasn't convinced. And soon enough things started to take a turn for the worse. A few months later, I noticed a shift in my mom's behavior. One evening after a few drinks on the patio, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. This was the fourth major red flag. My mom had never been a big drinker. She would have a glass of wine on special occasions, but that was it. Yet now, within the span of a week, she had gone out twice for happy hour, laughing, drinking, and socializing like it was second nature. It wasn't just a harmless change in routine. It was sudden. And it worried me. That night, my dad and Jenny's husband had plans to work on their cars, so when the women decided to take the boat out, no one thought much of it. They left around 6:30 p.m. saying they'd be back by 9 o'clock. But 9 o'clock came and went. By the time my mom finally returned, everything unraveled in a way none of us could have ever imagined. There she was, completely falling apart, sobbing uncontrollably, clinging to my dad as if letting go would break her. Between ragged breaths, she confessed the unthinkable. She had cheated on him. My dad stood there, frozen, blindsided by the words coming from the woman he had spent nearly 4 decades with. 38 years of marriage. 40 years together. And to his knowledge, their relationship had been perfect. Flawless. And now, in a single moment, it was shattered. Reality slowly sank in, but my dad, ever the rational man, didn't explode in anger. Instead, he gently told my mom to take a shower, suggesting they talk in the morning when emotions weren't running so high. But she wouldn't let go. She clung to him, sobbing, as if holding on to him physically could undo what had already been done. Eventually he managed to guide her to the bathroom. She showered, trying to compose herself, while he made a decision that would change everything. Silently, while she was still in the bathroom, my dad began moving his belongings. He packed his clothes, his personal items, everything important, taking them out through the back door, loading them into the camper with quiet determination. Mom had started calling him, her voice panicked, but he didn't answer. Then, finally at 6 a.m. on April 9th, she received a text from him. It was short. Direct. Their marriage was officially over. At that moment, Mom completely broke down. She called him again and this time he answered. But the damage had already been done. My dad remained calm as he repeated what he had already told her in his text. It was over. He informed my mom that he was filing for divorce and that nothing she said or did would change his mind. The betrayal had been too deep, too final. Since then, he has traveled more than 1,800 miles, putting as much distance between himself and the life he left behind. My brother and I know where he is, but we've made a promise not to share that information with Mom. As much as it pains us to see her unravel, we respect Dad's wishes. He was the one who was wronged and he deserves to have space to heal on his own terms. But that doesn't mean we aren't worried about her. Mom isn't eating. She isn't sleeping. She's driving around aimlessly, searching for Dad as if she can somehow undo what's been done. We're terrified she's going to get into an accident, collapse from exhaustion, or worse, push herself to the brink of a heart attack. Eventually, we convinced her to drive up to my house and stay with us for a few nights. She reluctantly agreed and was expected to arrive that afternoon. Over the next 10 days, everything took a drastic turn. When Mom showed up at my house, she looked terrible, physically and emotionally drained. She barely spoke, just muttered that she wasn't feeling well. After a brief conversation, We helped her settle into one of the guest rooms so she could rest. An hour later, the sound of my youngest daughter's panicked screams shattered the quiet. "Dad, come quick." I rushed to the bedroom, my heart pounding, and found Mom unresponsive. We called an ambulance immediately. She was burning up with a dangerously high fever, her body completely worn down. The doctors diagnosed her with a severe infection and started her on 4 antibiotics right away. For 5 days, her fever raged on, leaving us all on edge, fearing the worst. Finally, it broke. Yesterday, she was discharged, weak but stable. Throughout her hospital stay, she kept asking the same question: "Has he called?" Each time I gave her the truth. Dad hadn't reached out. Not even once. I assured her that I had been keeping him updated on her condition, but he had chosen to remain silent. And I couldn't blame him. He had given her nearly 4 decades of loyalty, only to be betrayed in the end. My family and I visited her every day, making sure she was never alone for too long. But instead of finding comfort in our presence, she became more and more restless, almost agitated. And then came the most disturbing part. According to Mom finally admitted the truth. She told me she had only spoken to him that Tuesday, while Josephine and Jenny were busy entertaining the other 2 men. Yes, you heard that right. But when she met up with him again on Thursday, things changed. She found herself drawn in by his attention, his flattery. And despite everything she had built with Dad, all the years, the life they shared, she let herself give in. She became intimate with him. Hearing this made my stomach turn. It was disturbing in a way I couldn't even put into words. No matter how wild my imagination had ever been, this was something I never could have predicted. My own mother. And for what? A fleeting moment? A cheap thrill? But as much as I wanted to yell, to ask her how she could do this to Dad, I kept it to myself. Because there was something else I couldn't tell her yet. Dad had made his decision. He was planning to serve Mom with the divorce papers at my house. He wanted her to have family around when it happened. People who could support her when everything came crashing down. Friday was going to be one of the hardest days of our lives. I won't lie, I feel guilty knowing what's coming. Watching her unravel over the past few weeks has been painful, and part of me wishes there was a way to soften the blow. But I owe it to Dad to stand by him, to help him see this through. And when Mom inevitably breaks down, I'll be there for her too. For now, all I can do is wait and hope for the best. Mom used to have a beautiful life. She and Dad owned a house by the river in Arizona, complete with boats, jet skis, and a camper. Every summer they would travel the country together, exploring the coasts, the mountains, living the kind of life people dream of. And now she lives alone in a small apartment near my sister, having given up everything for a fleeting moment of excitement. A single night that cost her more than she ever imagined. I can't even begin to understand the depth of her regret. Over the past 6 months, she's been trying to regain control of her emotions, to manage the stress that nearly consumed her. There's been progress. Some days are better than others. But she's not the same woman she used to be. Not even close. Mom used to be a pillar of strength, confident, unwavering, always carrying herself with a sense of purpose. But now she seems fragile, broken in ways I never imagined. The vibrant energy that once defined her is gone, replaced by a quiet emptiness. A few months ago, I managed to help her get a job at a craft superstore where a close friend of mine is the manager. Surprisingly, she's been doing exceptionally well. Her coworkers respect her, and she's even been praised as one of the store's best employees. I can only hope that having this job gives her some sense of purpose again, something to ground her in the midst of everything she's lost. As for Dad, he's moved on. And in a way that none of us saw coming. She's much younger than him, which makes it almost ironic to say, but they seem to connect on a level that works. She's a YouTube travel vlogger, always on the move, exploring new places and sharing her experiences with the world. Over the past 4 months, she and Dad have been traveling together, camping, road tripping, and simply enjoying life. She hasn't featured him directly on her channel, but she's mentioned him in a few videos. And even if the world doesn't see it, I do. Dad is happy. Happier than he's been in years. And he told me that himself. A different kind of love story. I never believed in love at first sight. It always seemed like something straight out of movies, unrealistic, overly romanticized. But then I met her. Miley. I still remember that day so clearly. I was nervous, awkward, and completely unaware of the mess on my shirt. But there was no denying it, I was drawn to her from the moment our eyes met. She had this effortless charm, a confidence that made me feel like I had known her forever. While my shyness held me back from making the first move, Miley was different. She was bold, easygoing, and absolutely stunning. Instead of waiting for me to stumble over my words, she took the initiative and started talking to me. And that was it. Meeting Miley erased any doubt I had about love at first sight. Our relationship blossomed after Noelle's wedding, and before I knew it, she invited me to meet her parents. That meeting changed everything. Miley's relationship with her father had always been strained, and after one final confrontation she made a choice, to leave her childhood home behind and start a new life with me. Just a week later we held a small ceremony, exchanged vows and officially became husband and wife. It wasn't grand or elaborate, but it was ours. Miley made sure of that, even going as far as intentionally excluding her father from the guest list. Our first year of marriage was everything I had hoped for, filled with laughter, understanding, and a kind of happiness I had never experienced before. But as time went on, things started to shift. Miley was passionate, headstrong, and knew exactly what she wanted. But the more I tried to be the partner she needed, the more I realized I couldn't always meet her expectations. I wasn't willing to give up who I was. And I wasn't going to blindly follow her every demand. I told Miley that as husband and wife, we needed to respect each other's opinions. A successful marriage required maturity, mutual understanding, and the willingness to listen, even when it wasn't easy. She was stunned. Miley had never been told no before. It was as if the concept was completely foreign to her. Overwhelmed with emotions, she broke down in tears, swearing that she would change, though I could tell it wasn't something that came naturally to her. Despite the challenges in our relationship, life was moving forward. We had experienced significant financial success, allowing us to upgrade from cramped apartments to spacious, comfortable homes. Our living situation had drastically improved, and with it came a shift in how people viewed me, including my father-in-law. When he heard about my achievements, his attitude toward me softened. He started reaching out, casually calling every now and then. At first, I was hesitant to entertain his sudden change of heart. The years of tension between us weren't something I could easily forget. But Emily and Noah encouraged me to let go of the past, to move forward instead of holding on to old resentments. So, after some hesitation, I answered his calls. Over time, I became more comfortable with the idea and eventually invited my in-laws to our home. While they were happy to visit, it became clear that their excitement wasn't just about reconnecting, it was about showing off. To them, our home wasn't just a place to visit, it was something to brag about. They took pride in telling their acquaintances about their successful son-in-law, eager to flaunt their connection to our newfound wealth. As Christmas approached, they pushed for a lavish dinner party, one that would impress their friends and relatives. But I wanted something more intimate, a small gathering with close family. Despite my preference, Miley still extended invitations to some of her parents' friends and extended family. When the evening arrived, my parents and Noah's family showed up dressed nicely but appropriately for the occasion. But Miley's family? They arrived in extravagant, formal outfits that looked more suited for a high-profile gala than a holiday dinner. It was clear they weren't just there to celebrate, they were there to put on a show. As the night went on, their behavior made it increasingly obvious that they felt they had done their part for the evening. They weren't interested in genuine connection, just appearances. Frustrated with how the party was unfolding, I pulled Miley aside and told her that I'd had enough. I needed to wrap things up before I completely lost my patience. Miley saw how upset I was and told me to go upstairs and rest while she handled things. With a pounding headache and growing resentment toward her, her parents, and their self-absorbed friends, I locked myself in our bedroom, hoping that sleep would give me some relief. But what happened next would change everything. I woke up around 3 a.m. from a restless sleep, an uneasy feeling gnawing at me. Something wasn't right. I got out of bed, still groggy, and as I stepped out of the room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Miley. With another man. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Fueled by rage and betrayal, I grabbed my phone and recorded everything. My hands were shaking, but I needed proof. Then, unable to contain myself any longer, I stormed into the room and threw water on her. Miley gasped, shocked to see me standing there. She had clearly assumed I'd sleep through the night, that I'd only find out in the morning, when she could have time to weave together another lie. But I had caught her red-handed. Without thinking, I punched the guy and kicked him out of my house, yelling at the top of my lungs. The commotion woke up Miley's parents and the remaining guests, who rushed into the room in confusion. Her father immediately tried to downplay the situation, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that the man was just a friend's son. But Miley wasn't even trying to deny it anymore. She collapsed into tears, begging me for another chance. She admitted to everything, her affairs, her deceit, saying she was sorry. But instead of taking responsibility, she tried to blame her father, thinking that shifting the blame would somehow make it easier for me to forgive her. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I had given her chances before. I had excused her entitled behavior because of how she was raised. But this was different. This wasn't just selfishness or immaturity. This was a betrayal of trust. And that was something I could never overlook. Because infidelity isn't a mistake. It's a choice.